John West. So, John, I really appreciate you being here with us today. You got yourself involved with none other than Dacre Stoker, Bram Stoker's great-grandnephew. We're here today, of course, to talk about the documentary film that you're collaborating on with fellow filmmaking partner Jason Figgis called The Father of Dracula. How did you come on board to this project? How did you and Dacre first decide that you're going to go ahead and make this happen?
Well, it was actually Jason Figgis's idea to do a documentary on Bram Stoker, and he came up with the title Father of Dracula. Because I've been working with Jason for a few years now. I originally started chatting to him, I think it was in 2018, because I write for magazines. I wanted to interview him for a couple of mags, and he eventually phoned me up, and we really hit it off because we're both about the same age, watched the same programs, same films, even read the same books. Although I was in England, he was in Ireland. And he said to me, do you want to, be in a film that I'm doing called The Ghost of Winifred Meeks? I need someone to find locations. I would like to film it in Suffolk. And would you like to be in it as well? As I do a bit of acting. So, and that was, a great success. It came out on DVD. In America, it's called Winifred Meeks, but over in England, it's called The Ghost of Winifred Meeks. And we ended up doing other documentaries, films together. We even did the Queen Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee videos as well, which was a great honor. And and we got other films lined up, other documentaries. I wrote a documentary on Shirley Baker, who's a photographer in Britain. Right. But anyway, Jason said to me, I know Dacre Stoker, who I was obviously aware of, descendant of Bram Stoker. He said, you're a great writer. Would you like to write this documentary, basically exploring the life of Bram Stoker and, what made him tick and why he came to write Dracula? And so I ended up speaking to Dacre, and he sent me a lot of research material, which I used. And it took me about 2 months to write in all. And I was referencing other books as well, books by Montague Summers, Dan Farson, people like that. But so that's how I basically came on board. But it was originally Jason Figgis's idea, and he came up with a title, and I just ended up writing it. And Dacre narrates it as well, so which is brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was your first impression of the project when you must have thought, wow, how the heck are you going to stuff all of this history of Dracula and Bram? And Dacre's telling me all the time that he's constantly finding new pieces of the puzzle to put together. And you must be thinking, like, what a huge monumental task. This is going to have to be a 100-hour-long documentary. So what was your first impression jumping on board and getting all this research material that the Dacre was sending to you on a regular?
Well, I must admit, it was a little bit daunting because I know I'd written a biography of, Shirley Baker. I didn't really, apart from the basics, I'd read a couple of books by Dan Farson and people like that on Dracula. I didn't really know that much about Bram apart from the basics. So, but I really got into it, and I love writing, I love research, and Dacre sent me tons of material. So I basically just got to work, and I spent a few hours every day writing it and researching it. I even watched a couple of documentaries as well, one narrated by Christopher Lee and one narrated by Vincent Price. So they had a hand in this, so thanks, guys. And about 2 months, I sent it over to Jason. He loved it. I sent it over to Dacre. He praised it, the writing style, which is obviously very nice to get from another writer. So once I got into it, I really enjoyed it, and it didn't take as long as I thought. But yeah, I did think it was a little bit daunting at the start when you know very little about the chat.
Yeah, exactly. That's huge, and I find from reading Dacre's book Stoker on Stoker as well, which is all about Bram. Like, what a fascinating character. And I guess certainly living in the UK. Being a huge fan of folklore as well. So you're obviously very familiar, at least with the myth, the legend of the monster of Dracula itself. Was there anything in going through all that research that you thought that particularly stood out to you that, was a clear-cut opening to a long drawn-out rabbit hole that you're looking for to get lost in? We're like, wow, I had no idea about this, and this is fascinating. Whether it was going to go to the documentary or not, that must have been pretty exciting research for you.
Yeah, I did find out quite a few things about Bram and Dracula that I didn't know before. For instance, I didn't realise that Dracula's castle was actually based on a castle in Scotland, Slains Castle, and that I never knew. And also that when Bram was very young, he had a mysterious illness and almost died, and then suddenly this illness went away. So we don't really know what it was, but he might have been bloodlet as a child, which basically then used to weirdly thought if they took blood off you, it'd make you better. It got rid of all these bad energies or whatever in the blood. So did that have an impact on a young boy? And, did that help sort of create Dracula? Because, he was sitting there watching blood being taken out of him. I mean, I never realised that. And also, crucially, his mother, Charlotte, had a great influence on Bram and influenced the character of Dracula because of all the stories she used to tell Bram as a kid. For Irish folklore stories and things about blood-sucking fairies and witchcraft. And she told him about this cholera epidemic where loads of people died and some of them might have been buried alive and tried to get out of their coffins. So yes, it was quite interesting finding all this stuff out. Dracula was sort of, shall we say, being created over quite a few years. He didn't just appear from nowhere. He started off in Stoker's childhood, basically.
Yeah, I thought that was probably one of the most fascinating aspects of learning about him as well. Is just it was almost inevitable. I mean, you think about Bram. He was a theater manager for the Lyceum Theater with Sir Henry Irving, and he was a clerk of the Petty Sessions. And you thought, and this is the guy that wrote Dracula. But then when you dive a bit more into his history and his family history, like, yeah, that makes a lot more sense now.
And it does. And also he was inspired by Lady Wilde's book on Irish folklore, and Lady Wilde is Oscar Wilde's mum. And that was fascinating as well, that there was this Oscar Wilde connection. And of course, Bram married a lady, Florence, who Oscar Wilde was in love with. So there was that other connection. So a lot of people think Oscar Wilde was totally gay, but because he wasn't, he was bisexual because he was married with kids, and he was a little bit in love with this with Bram's wife, before they actually got married. So I didn't know about that either. But
that's incredible.
It was fascinating writing. I mean, I love the vampire stories. I mean, as a kid in England, we used to have on the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, and they used to have a double bill at weekends. So you used to get sort of like a couple of Hammer Draculas or Universal Horror. So I was aware of the character of Dracula from an early age. I grew up watching sort of Bela Lugosi and Christopher Lee. So he was always a fascinating character, but I must admit I didn't really know that much about what was behind the character. I mean, I knew about Vlad the Impaler, the dictator, in the 15th century, went around staking people. He wasn't staked, he used to stake people. Well,
he was
not really a character. And he's admired in that part of world, Transylvania, as a great hero. But when you read about him, he was a bit of a lad, shall we say?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah,
he had some strange taste in decorations.
Yeah, well, I certainly wouldn't have wanted to upset him because there was one place where these Turkish ambassadors went to him and they didn't take off their hats because it wasn't their custom, and he had the hats nailed to their heads. So they're very short now, so he didn't kill them. But again, it's not the sort of thing I'd want to, so he didn't upset him, basically. That was the thing.
Yeah, no kidding. I wonder where that's where the term nailed it came from.
Yeah. Well, apparently when Vlad the Impaler was imprisoned, he used to end up impaling little frogs, so he couldn't get away from that impaling. So he couldn't get older people, so he got older frogs instead. So, basically he was unbalanced. I know they try to make out a lot of these atrocities they didn't happen and that, but there must have been some truth to it because all the different people that were writing about it, they might have exaggerated it.
Sure.
But, he was a very nice person. Sorry to all the Romanians and now who think he's a hero, but anyway.
Yeah, maybe he was a hero, but at what cost?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So when I know one of the things that I thought was really cool too is that Dacre was mentioning that when he was sending a lot of this material, a lot of the stuff that he thought would make a great piece of the documentary, you actually turned him down and you thought, no, this is going to work for the documentary. And I know he mentioned that he really appreciated that you were able to take a stand and speak on behalf of the documentary. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, that's the process as far as how to sift through his material, deciding what's great but not a good fit for the documentary. What would be a good fit for the documentary?
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember the exact sort of instances now, but I mean, one obviously we couldn't have it too long, and two, if there was evidence that was sort of basically repeating itself, I didn't want to include too much in that way, and also certain things that perhaps hearsay that we couldn't really prove, and it was speculation. And I have put some things in, a suggestion that you might have, known about a certain figure in history, but there's no actual proof for that. But yeah, I mean, I just basically sifted through it and decided what needed to go in. And if it was a bit too obscure, or then I'd leave it out. I wanted to sort of, with my writing style, I like things to be very clear and concise, and not sort of muddy the waters with stuff. As I said, I can't remember particular instances now, but I do remember there was stuff that I sort of rejected, shall we say. But all the main stuff is in there. It was I literally only minor little snippets that I didn't use. It's not going to detract from the documentary or anything like that. And obviously, if people want to find out more on him, they can just buy Dacre's books, of course.
Absolutely. And there's a few of them out there, and I've no doubt there's going to continue to be even more as he picks up more pieces of the puzzle as well, and all that stuff. So when you were, and one of the things I found fascinating about this, because I know Dacre mentioned that he had an opportunity to get quite a bit of drone footage as well when he was touring. I know he does Experience Transylvania. I think he does tours in Cruden Bay as well. I don't know if he does that on the regular, but he does a lot of that too, of course, where Dracula was written, and then the castle that's out there on Cruden Bay as well is, I guess, Bram used the interior for that. The octagonal room when Jonathan Harker first gets into the castle, that's the room that he sees. It's the same one that I guess Bram would have been invited to by the Duke at the time. So when you've got all this information, I mean, that's great that you do have some of the video stuff, but from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, a lot of it isn't an actual film. A lot of it is just simply notes, and it's Dacre's writing as well as the notations that were taken from various sources and stuff. How did you incorporate that into a film? I found that really interesting.
Oh, right. Well, the editing is down to Jason, and the film actually hasn't been edited yet. So obviously that would be Jason's work to sort of edit the images into the text. Where stuff is mentioned, he'll put film footage in, photographs, things like that. I mean, obviously Dacre supplied a lot of research material. I mean, the whole thing was written by me. I did use quotes from Bram Stoker when he gave an interview with this lady, and sort of little excerpts from books that Bram Stoker would have referenced. So it was totally written by me, researched by Dacre. But as far as the filmmaking process goes, I mean, I've seen the drone footage; it looks wonderful, and but that'll be over to Jason to sort of work his magic and put that into the finished product, because the actual documentary, although I've written it, and there's bits being filmed, it hasn't actually been completed as yet.
Right. And that's understandable too. And that kind of leads into the next question that I had as well, of course, with the crowdfunding campaign that's being launched, so that Jason can get the space he needs to properly edit and properly piece everything together. So I understand he's probably everybody's very excited about that, especially you folks, to be able to get that space. What was it always going to be a crowdfunded project, or was there other aspects of funding as well? I mean, the fact that this has such historical significance, I was wondering, are there any, historical grants that you could apply for, or what thought process went into that as far as the crowdfunding and what you're hoping to get out of that, and why it's so important to have that crowdfunding?
Yeah, well, basically, I mean, obviously, we need to raise funds to get it made, because Jason's got to be paid as a director and editor, and things like that. I mean, it's going to go on Indiegogo, it's going to be launched on April the 1st, so people will be able to find it there, and it's Father of Dracula. But I mean, there are funding outlets out there, but the trouble is, funding now is so difficult. We've got that sort of economic situation, especially in Britain. We had the lockdown, which wrecked the economy, and it's wrecked the economy of other countries as well. So funding is very difficult to get. I mean, I did approach TV companies and things like that to see if they were interested. And sadly, they weren't for whatever reason. Oh, we don't feel, there's, we haven't got the budget to sort of do a documentary on Bram Stoker, but thanks very much. So we did pursue that. So we thought, well, Indiegogo is a very good funding platform. And obviously with Dacre's contacts and, my contacts in the UK and that, and obviously with people like yourself advertising it, we hope to raise, some good funds, shall we say, and in order to get it made and get it out there. But it will definitely appear. It will be, hopefully come out on DVD, Blu-ray if there's a demand for that. I know there's more streaming now, but it will definitely be out. But obviously the fundraising helps, to get it out there as quickly as possible.
Right, and for everybody watching this as well, what kind of perks can they expect from the crowdfunding?
Oh, right. Well, they get a signed script from me, some stuff from Jason, a portrait of Bram, also soundtrack, downloadable soundtrack. They'll get a copy of the film. They'll get a copy of my book as well, Britain's Haunted Land, which which came out last year. British Ghost Stories. The top contributors will get a signed copy of that. So so there's loads of perks. And you'll also get a list in the credits as a producer, things like that, a thank you. You'll get a thank you email from Jason. So, so there's quite a few things. So it's not just, we want your money and you're getting nothing back. It's like you get quite a few goodies depending on how much you pledge.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And everybody watch this, please go and donate something, even if you can't afford too much. I mean, the fact that you guys have made it this far, too, I'll assume that we're all Dracula fans on here that are watching this as well. So we got to make this happen because there's so much history and it's so important. I think even more so today that, with streaming platforms, etc., we get our media and that it's just quickly here and gone at the same time. And I would hate for something like that to happen with Dracula and the story of Dracula. Which actually brings me to my next question as well, John, because this is obviously called the Father of Dracula, so I think it alludes to the fact that the focus is going to be on Bram and on his history, but how much would you say, I don't know if you can give actual numbers or ratios or whatever, but what can folks expect as far as learning about Bram compared to learning about the history of Dracula, which might be all one of the same thing?
It's probably, I sort of wouldn't like to say, I suppose 50-50. I mean, it's about Bram's life. It's about the influences that caused him to write Dracula. But there is stuff in there about Dracula, what inspired the character, his impact on culture, films and that. So, yes, it's not just a straight biography of Bram Stoker and Dracula gets a brief mention. Dracula is there from the beginning to the end. So it is a Bram Stoker / Dracula documentary.
Yeah, very cool. And do you don the cape at all in this one, John? I know you mentioned you've got some acting credits. So are you in the film as well?
No, I'm not actually. I could do a Bela Lugosi. I want to drink your blood. But no, I'm not in it. No, I might be an extra, I suppose, if it comes out on Blu-ray or DVD. But Dacre narrates it, and but no, I didn't turn up as Dracula or Jonathan Harker or anything like that. I wouldn't mind if you do it. I mean, Jason's written a great adaptation of the novel, so I mean, I'd love to appear in that if we could ever get the funding. But it'd be such a long film because it's such a long novel. But no, I'm not in it as an actor. No.
Very cool. And from what I understand as well, I mean, there's always, you always hope that you can take things as far as, I guess, what I lack a better way to put it, fans and consumers will allow you to take things. But are there plans based on the success of the campaign and based on the success of this film to do more like this to the point where maybe it'll end up being part of a series? Or is this just something that you're just putting 100% effort into this one, figuring this might be just a 100% standalone documentary about Dracula and Bram?
Oh, no, actually, I spoke to Jason about this some time ago. I mean, we could do one, The Mother of Frankenstein, about how Frankenstein came to be, with a monster, because Frankenstein was obviously the person that created him. And everyone seems to think the monster was called Frankenstein. So no, it could be ongoing. So I mean, I write about ghosts as well, so you could have sort of documentaries about ghosts. So definitely, if it's this great success, there's a chance to sort of write other stuff. I mean, a documentary about the origins of werewolves, and tying it in with the Universal werewolf series, because that gave a lot of sort of that influenced a lot of werewolf legends now. The silver bullets and things like that, and the pentagram, and could be a series. You never know. The Mother of Frankenstein could be the next one.
That'd be pretty fascinating. I would watch that as well. I've got a little, of course, Frankenstein's monster back here. That is not Frankenstein, people. That is the monster, Frankenstein's monster.
My favorite one. But I love the Universal Frankensteins. I do like the Hammers, and Peter Cushing was a great Baron of Frankenstein. But I am a big fan of the Universal ones. I've got to admit. I mean, Boris Karloff was, for me, the perfect monster. I know he only did the first three, but I mean, what a great way he portrayed that creature and gave him some humanity as well. Whereas sadly, the actors who played him later in the Universal ones, he became a bit of a sort of lumbering, killing machine, didn't he? Whereas, obviously the original idea, he was almost childlike, wasn't he? He didn't want to be what he was.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that scene with the little girl too. I don't know if I should say spoiler alert. I mean, the movie's been around forever, so if you haven't seen it yet, that's on you guys. But yeah, that scene with the little girl though too. I mean, he just absolutely humanizes that, and it ends up being just sad. And then that scene always breaks my heart every time I watch it. So,
when the girl throws the girl into the water.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, it just crushes me.
Yeah, because he thought she was going to float like the leaves, wasn't it? Do you know when it was shown over here? Do you know that scene was cut originally in the cinemas, and even in the early screenings, I can remember as a kid. When I got it on DVD originally, I hadn't seen that scene before because it wasn't in the TV versions. They cut it.
Jeez, that's the epitome of the entire movie, I think. That one scene just summarizes everything that's right and everything that's wrong about Frankenstein's monster and how that experiment went.
Yeah. It's funny they actually nicked that scene for an episode of Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby, which I'm watching at the moment, and you have a little girl and the Hulk comes up to her and I thought, oh God, they borrowed that. Never credited the Universal film. But he ends up throwing the father into the lake, the Hulk, but the girl falls in and he tries to save her, and she is saved. She doesn't drown. But I just thought, so he influenced the Incredible Hulk as well. And because awesome. He was great.
Absolutely, yeah. That really put two and two together. I guess it's, that it was hiding in plain sight all this time.
Yeah.
And speaking of that kind of stuff as well, I know you mentioned, certainly some of the folklore and things like that. Is that also going to be part of the documentary as well, as far as some of the folklore that was behind there? I mean, when the one scene, of course, where the Demeter ship crashes onto the shores of Whitby and Dracula finally comes out, but he comes out as, and I've only seen it in writing, so I'm not going to pronounce it properly. I think it was the Bourgeois, I think it was, where it was like the big black dog that was of claw and teeth.
Oh, that's in there. Yeah, that's in there. The legendary black hellhound. It's a great British legend, particularly in East Anglia. It's got different names: Black Shuck, the Galley Trot, and it's this legendary demon hound that's found in English culture. And there's a theory that it was brought over with the Vikings. The hellhound of Odin. Yeah. So that's still a tradition now. I mean, I live in East Anglia at the moment, and in Suffolk we've got the legends of the black dog. I mean, Bungay, which is up the road, so apparently in the Tudor period, the black dog appeared and killed a load of people in the church during a thunderstorm. And I've actually met people, because I said I write about ghosts, who claim to have seen that, and they swear blind they saw this giant dog with red eyes and things like that. So that's in there, definitely, that legendary black hellhound, which obviously inspired Bram when he wrote his classic novel, because obviously Dracula turns into the dog and runs up the beach from the wreck of the Demeter. So
that was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, all the folklore was there, all the influences, Montague Summers, people like that, Lady Wilde, as I mentioned earlier. That's all in there. The folkloric influences in Britain and Eastern Europe, definitely. So I do, because I'm really into folklore. I've loved it since I was a kid. So that is all in there as well.
Oh, perfect. And do you also touch on a lot of the, you kind of mentioned before, we were talking a little bit about Frankenstein and that one iconic scene being, being cut out and then censored out of the mass market when it first came out. Do you talk about a lot of the censorships as well from Dracula and, the fact that Bram had by hand, I still can't believe, this blows my mind every time I think about it, that he literally by hand had to stroke out 30,000 words to appease this publisher, and then by hand correct them all and kind of have little bridge things to connect the pieces, since he took a big chunks of that. Is that discussed in there as well?
Oh, yes, definitely. That's very important, because a lot of the stuff that was cut out ended up in a book published after his death, Dracula's Guest, which was, I think Dracula's Daughter was loosely based on that, very loosely based. Oh. Anyway, at least, Bram's widow got some money out of that one. But yeah, that's all in there, definitely. I mean, interestingly enough, one of the things he had to cut out was a reference to the Jack the Ripper murders, because although Dracula was published in the 1890s, the Ripper murders were only in the 1888. And so there was a reference to the Ripper murders, which his publisher said, no, it's too close to what really happened. And so, and because in the original version, Bram claimed that some of the events of that novel really took place, and the publisher said, no, we've got to cut that out because that's going to horrify people too much. So that all went. I mean, interestingly enough, as it mentions the Ripper murders, as I said, there is another Jack the Ripper connection to Dracula and Bram Stoker, which I'd love to tell you about. Perhaps, as Michael Caine would say, not a lot of people know that.
Yeah, no. When you first mentioned that to me as well, John, I leaned in and I thought, all right, I need to hear about this, because I had no idea. What's the connection with Jack the Ripper and Dracula?
Well, Bram Stoker, as you mentioned, he was the manager of the Lyceum Theatre. One of his friends was Hall Caine, who was a dramatist, a writer, who was a homosexual, and he had an affair with a chap called Francis Tumblety, who is a very, very strong Jack the Ripper suspect. And actually, we're going to be doing a documentary about that in due course. I've written some material for it already. But Tumblety was arrested on suspicion of being Jack the Ripper, and he jumped bail and fled back to America. Now, Scotland Yard took it so seriously that they actually sent someone to shadow him, but they could never prove enough to sort of, get him extradited to bring him back. But he was a suspect, and he'd been arrested as a suspect. But Tumblety actually it's believed he needs to attend the Beefsteak Club, which Bram Stoker attended. So there's a possibility that Bram Stoker met a man that could have been Jack the Ripper. So there you go. Can't prove it, but it's probable that they actually met. So yes, there is a connection between Bram Stoker and one of the leading suspects, in the Ripper murders.
Well,
and he was certainly very friendly with Hall Caine, who was Tumblety's lover. So, but that's as far as we can take it. We don't have any writing from Bram saying, "Oh yeah, I knew Tumblety," and things like that. There was hearsay that he met him and didn't like him. He didn't like his character and that. But again, there's no documentary proof for that. Perhaps it's out there, but we haven't found it as yet. But it's just fascinating that, there is a connection with Dracula and Jack the Ripper. And let's face it, I mean, I mentioned it in the narration, the Ripper murders clearly partly inspired Dracula because of, the horrific nature of what happened. These women were literally torn apart, the throats were cut and that. So it definitely played a part in the creation of that character.
Yeah, and the elusiveness of Dracula within the films, and essentially drawing the women out of their homes, and no trace in sight of what actually happened to them, other than puncture and then all the wonderful side effects, I guess, afterwards. But and I mean, Bram was such a brilliant person by all accounts too, that he'd have a hard time thinking that he couldn't meet a person like that, and suspected that maybe he didn't like this person. That you wonder if he had his own suspicions and was putting two and two together, and maybe that's why he wanted to put that into his novel that they, ultimately had cut out of the original manuscript.
Yeah, could well be. I mean, people who met Tumblety said that, you know, he was a very strange character. He used to collect wounds for a start. He hated women, you know, but hated prostitutes. So yeah, he was a very, very strange character, and you know, very strong evidence linking him to other murders as well in America. He always seemed to be around where women were killed. So he was either very unlucky, it was more than coincidence. So, I mean, we can't definitely say he was Jack the Ripper, but let's say there's tons of suspects out there, as we know, but he would definitely be in the top 10. He's a very strong suspect, and a Scotland Yard inspector, a little child, actually believed he was Jack the Ripper. So, but we'll never know for certain. But yeah, it's an interesting subject, the Ripper in itself. And of course, later writers brought Jack the Ripper and Dracula together. So, I mean, comics and books and that. So those characters have been linked in fiction anyway. So, and of course, Jack the Ripper's become a legendary figure in his own right. You know, it's the black bag, the cape, the top hat, the cane, you know, disappearing into the fog. And so, yeah, so he's almost become like Dracula. You know, a lot of people actually think he didn't even exist, Jack the Ripper. They forget he was a real murderer. You know, the myth and the image is taken over from the real man, whoever he was.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, you know, and it makes you wonder what's going to happen years down the road. You know, I'm sure that, you know, as a lot of people's memory of the reality of what happened starts to dissipate, that I suppose the myth is what's going to start to take over, much like, you know, Vlad the Impaler, Vlad Tepes. You know, it seems like he's more myth than, you know, than history at this point, you know, than a historical figure. Yeah.
Well, he's a folk hero, you know, to the people in Eastern Europe, because, you know, he fought the Turks and things like that. But yeah, there's more myth about him than reality now. And but like I said, a lot of the things he's probably accused of, he didn't do because things got exaggerated. But he certainly wasn't a pleasant character. He was basically a man that was feared and respected. But I think from my research, he was clearly unbalanced. And as I said before, it wasn't the sort of guy that you'd want to get on the wrong side of. But it's funny how these characters become more myth than anything. I mean, I've actually met people who believe Sherlock Holmes really existed. I was once in London. Yeah. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. Well, he was Basil Rathbone. But I was in the Sherlock Holmes pub in London, which is apparently the pub that was featured in Hound of the Baskervilles, a Northumberland hotel that's in Northumberland Avenue. And I was chatting to this woman about Sherlock Holmes. I suppose, you know, one of the greatest creations in fiction ever. And she got really angry and said, "But he really existed." And I said, "But no, he was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. You know, made this character up. He was based on Dr. Bell in Edinburgh, but Sherlock Holmes did not exist." And she said, "No, Conan Doyle was his literary agent, and Dr. Watson was a real person." And I sort of backed off because I thought, well, I'm not going to win this one. And she's convinced she was going to attack me. She got really angry. I've never forgotten that. But yeah, but there are people who believe Sherlock Holmes is a real person. I suppose he's only as real as we want to make him.
I suppose so too, much like Santa Claus or, you know, the Boogeyman or, you know, those kind of polarizing figures, I suppose, where I guess if you have the sort of life that needs one of these characters to be real, you'll find a way to make them real in your own reality, I suppose. Much like vampires and lycanthropes and So good luck trying to argue that out to this, to certain people, right? Oh, they're real. I've seen it with my own eyes. Yeah. So which I guess is the fascination, and that's the thing. And I imagine that's going to be a part of the Father Dracula too, is it because Bram had everything. It was so immersed in reality that it's very easy that you could certainly wonder if this is a metafictional novel, if it's, laced with all this reality, because in a sense it is a bit of a metafictional novel. I mean, even from, the Demeter that I mentioned is based on, real Russian schooner, the Dmitri, and it crashed under, strange circumstances and all the rest of it. And so much of reality is so intricately entwined in the workings of Dracula that, you can't really call it complete fiction because there's so much reality or so much nonfiction that's in there. They really do work side by side. Do you use for quite a bit of that in the film as well?
Oh yeah. I mean, for instance, a ship that came aground at Whitby. I mean, they found crates of silver sand in the hold. So Bram got the idea for the crates of earth from that, obviously. And yeah, I mean, I look into the folklore in Eastern Europe, and I bring that in, and how people believed in the reality of vampirism. I mean, people even today in parts of Transylvania and that believe in vampires. And, so for many people, it's a reality. And of course, we get people who believe they're vampires and live that life anyway. So, but I mean, even in New England in the 1890s, there was like a vampire epidemic, shall we say. There was, I think it was TB, and people actually believed that people have been drained of their energy by vampires, and actually dug up a woman who they believed was a vampire. They cut out her heart and burnt it and gave the ashes, I think it was to her brother, to cure him. It didn't work because he still died. But even in the 1890s in America, people were convinced these vampires were stalking the earth. And it's funny, in England, we don't have that many vampire stories. There's the odd one. I mean, there's a Grange vampire, which a chap called Augustus Hare wrote about in the 1890s, which supposedly happened in the Victorian age. And I write about it in my book, Britain's Haunted Heritage. My research suggests it was perhaps something that happened in the 17th century. But even over here, we had the odd vampire story. And also, you get people, they call them psychic vampires. They seem to drain your energy. I mean, I've met one or two people, and you just have to get away from them, because it's literally, you feel as if they're drawing your physical energy from you.
I know a few people like that.
Yeah. So I've met a couple like that. So it's weird. So but yeah, it's a fascinating. But it's all in there, the folklore, the ideas that Bram used, and but as I said, the vampirism is still very much with us in many parts of the world. People still believe in it, and of course, the vampire bat is a reality, as we know in South America. But yeah, no, I just found it fascinating doing all the research, and what inspired Bram Stoker. I mean, there's another one, Elizabeth Bathory, because he had a book about werewolves by I think it's Montague. Was it Montague's? No, it's Baring Gould. Sorry, Baring Gould, who wrote Onward Christian Soldiers, and she's mentioned in there. So he was aware of that, and she supposedly, she was a real figure. She was accused of murdering virgins to basically bathe in their blood. And she was walled up alive and left to die. I mean, there was hints of lesbianism as well, that she might have been, interested in them in other ways rather than the blood. Because apparently it was a story that she slapped a servant, and the blood from her nose went all over her face. And when she wiped it off, she thought that her skin was fresher. So she started to kill these girls to bathe in their blood. And it became a famous Hammer film as well, wasn't it? With I think it was Ingrid Pitt played Countess Dracula. So she played a part in it as well. This lady from, I think it was Hungary in the 15th century, who was a real character. I mean, some people claim that she was framed and, she didn't do these things, but there obviously was some truth in it, because basically they locked her up in the tower and left her to die.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, back then, if somebody did that now, you'd think, okay, well, that screams of guilt, because if they've got nothing to hide. But back then, of course, all it took was a strong suspicion from your fellow peers, and you're getting hung, or whatever the execution mode of the week was back then. I guess depending on what region you're in. So.
Yeah, well, she got away with being executed because she was an aristocrat, so they apparently walled her up alive, and just used to feed her through this little hole in the wall, and then one day she died. But yeah, she was a real person, and was accused of these terrible crimes. And she obviously did something, it wasn't all like fiction, and she was just set up, whether it was exaggerated, because they wanted to, publish about her and things, write about her.
Right.
But yeah, so she played a part in the creation of Dracula as well.
Yeah, and I remember that was one of the earlier reads that I remember when I was a kid as well. I was a strange little kid, and not much has changed. But I remember that was my first true love of horror too, was vampires. I'd be 7 or 8 years old. All my friends would be watching Pee-wee's Playhouse and reading comic books and that. And I'd be going to the occult section of the library and picking up all these Dracula books, reading all about Vlad and about. I remember Bathory was certainly one of them as well. And to this day, I just remember just being absolutely terrified. This woman way up in this, of course, I'm exaggerating now because of my memory, and this woman drenched in blood and pulled up in a wall and just to starve to death, and assuming she's still up there. So
yeah, I always remember I had a book by Daniel Farson, who was obviously also related to Bram Stoker, and he did a kids book on horror and that, and so was Dracula in there. So I remember reading that as a kid. I used to read loads of books on horror and ghosts as a kid. I mean, my mum had loads of books on ghosts, which I used to read when she weren't around. But my dad used to buy me all these, the Osborne book of horror and, Peter Haining's paperback books about vampires and things like that. So I've always been fascinated in it. And as I said earlier, I used to watch the horror double bills at the weekend, Hammer and Universal. So I've been hooked since I was a lad. And, I don't think it was that strange a childhood. I think I'm grown up okay. I don't have the desire to go out and bite people in the neck or anything like that. Well, I hope that. Or turn into a werewolf. Yeah, a bit of a...
Yeah, exactly. So, well, you know what, we're doing this. Well, I was going to say, we're doing this in my daytime, of course, because we're different time zones. So I don't know how dark it is over there. So, maybe that bright light behind you just for show.
Yeah, no, it's dark out there. It's coming up to 8 o'clock at night here, so it's completely dark at the moment. So,
okay.
So yeah, and I live in a town in Suffolk, which is got a castle at the end of the road, which is supposedly haunted. A church over the road where Henry VIII's illegitimate son's buried. And when I lived in a place called Saxmundham, I lived in a haunted place. So Britain is a very haunted land, and there's loads of things around there. The Witchfinder General, Matthew Hopkins, came to Framlingham and ducked people in the moat up the road. Made famous, of course, by Vincent Price in his wonderful film Witchfinder General, which I think is probably his best performance, which was filmed in Suffolk. So there's a lot of horror around here, shall we say. I mean, Matthew Hopkins was one of the worst characters ever to be produced in British history. This fanatic who wanted to kill everyone he could get his hands on because he thought they were witches or wizards. He did it for money, ultimately, but he was obviously a sadist as well.
Clearly, yeah. I mean, you don't do that kind of stuff, even for money. There's lines that are in the sand that you don't cross unless you want to.
Yeah, I think he hated women anyway. Clearly, he had a problem with women. And it was just a way. And the English Civil War was raging, so he took advantage of the breakdown in law and order to do what he did. But yeah, he came to Framlingham and ducked this chap who was a priest who'd been accused of witchcraft in the moat up the road, and he was sadly hung. And there's a legend that Matthew Hopkins was ducked himself and died. He was accused of witchcraft. Sadly, I'd like that. That would have been nice if it had happened, if he'd got a taste of his own medicine. But he probably died in bed of TB, apparently, and is buried in Essex. Although there is a legend which links into America that he changed his name and fled to America and was instrumental in the Salem witch trials. That's a story I've heard. So who knows? Perhaps he ended up going to America
and carrying on his wonderful golden life.
Yeah. But anyway, check out the film Witchfinder General with Vincent Price. It's Vincent Price was a lot older than Matthew Hopkins. He was in his 20s when he was doing his evil work, shall we say. But Vincent Price was wonderful in that film. It's coming out as a new edition on Blu-ray, funny enough. I don't know why I'm promoting that. I'm not getting money out of it.
You need to say that, right?
Yeah. Buy it now.
You're not a real vampire. You would never do anything that nice.
Yeah.
There's no gain in it for you. So no, that's great. And it's funny because I feel like I've heard about the Witchfinders General for years and years, and you can't get away from it. And I've heard a lot of other folks, offered as much praise as what you just gave it as well. And I still have not gotten around to that. So I will do my homework. That's great that the Blu-ray's coming out too. So I'll be able to...
Yeah, well, it's been out on Blu-ray for a while, but a new edition is coming out, remastered, with loads of extra stuff. So that's coming out. I think it's actually coming out on Monday. So yeah, I'm going to order that for Easter, I think.
Very cool. And speaking of which, and maybe Easter eggs too, so I'll kind of segue off of both of those things. Regarding your back to the Father of Dracula, so obviously it maybe depends on the funding, but are you hoping as well to have any additional, bonus features or anything like that, or is it just? And when I say just, I mean that's doing it injustice because it's going to be an incredible historical documentary for people to enjoy, but is it going to have any extras on top of it as well?
Well, I'm sure it will if it comes out on. If it's streaming, you don't really get extras with the streaming services. I'm a big fan of physical media because, I'm just old-fashioned. But if it comes out on Blu-ray or DVD, which I hope it does, that depends on the demand for it. But I mean, certainly there'd be extras. I mean, I imagine there'd be a photo gallery, perhaps an interview with Dacre, an interview with myself, things like that, an interview with Jason. So yeah, there'd certainly be some extras. I mean, Dacre's got tons of images of Dracula, so there'd be a fabulous photo gallery for a start. But if there's a demand for a Blu-ray or DVD release, there'd definitely be extras there as well. And obviously, when it comes out, hopefully we'll have special screenings and things like that in America and over here. And hopefully I'll be able to attend some. Dacre will be able to attend some. We're looking actually to have the premiere in Whitby, possibly.
Oh, that'd be great. Okay.
Yeah, and also one in Dublin as well, because obviously Bram's from that part of Ireland. So there's some interesting things, and also another extra. I intend to sort of turn the narration into a little book, which hopefully Dacre will do the intro for, and Jason, the director, will do the foreword, which will be filled with illustrations. So there will be an accompanying book to it, even if it doesn't come out on Blu-ray or DVD. So there'll be that as well, and no doubt Jason, who does book covers as well, will design a fantastic cover for it. But buy the book when it comes out. Perhaps when the book comes out, I can come back and promote it with you.
Absolutely. No, I'd be happy to have you on. I'm excited to talk about that book for sure. So that'd be great. And the documentary too, it's going to be about, I'm assuming about a runtime of what, maybe an hour and a half, typical for standard movie time?
Yes, I imagine so. 70 to 90 minutes. Depends on obviously the way Jason edits it with the footage. But yeah, we're looking at a maximum of a 90-minute documentary to,
Okay, very cool. And so a couple of quick questions here. How are we doing for time, by the way, John?
Oh, I'm fine. I haven't got to rush off anywhere. I was only going to watch more episodes of The Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby. So that can wait. I've got to. So I'm just going through an Incredible Hulk phase at the moment. I used to watch that series when I was a kid, so a bit of nostalgia for me. But now I've got plenty of time. Don't worry about it.
Great. I used to love the show too with the live action with Lou Ferrigno.
He's great.
I watched it all the time. Yeah, he's great. I love the story about him. What was it? He was driving home or something after the set, and he was still in his get up in his green Hulk mode, and I guess somebody cut him off, and of course they're giving him the finger and yelled at him, chastising, and then of course they see this guy come out, and they're like, "Whoa, nicest guy ever."
I love that. Bill Bixby was such a wonderful actor. Sadly, no longer with us. I mean, Lou's still around. Yeah. But I mean, I loved it. Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. And he used to sued by, was it Mr. McGee? Was it? Yeah, the reporter. He was sort of like, never leave. Yeah, he always caught him a few times. Actually, he once had him in a room. He had a gun on him, and he always used to get away though. But then again, it'd be a short series if he captured him. But a great series and well worth a watch. I prefer the old Hulk TV episodes to the films, I must admit. Some people might think that's heresy, but if no one's ever seen the Incredible Hulk the TV series, check it out because it's excellent. It's really, it's a classic.
It really is. Yeah, it really is. And I haven't revisited that, so I'm always worried when I go back to that stuff, like how well does it hold up? Is my memory over-exaggerating how awesome it was? That sort of thing. So it's always nice to revisit just to find out. So I did have a couple of questions, I guess, just to kind of wrap things up a little bit, John, so we can get you back to the Incredible Hulk as well, because we don't want to make him angry, Blu-ray or not.
No, I'm so agree. He can be trousers on though, didn't he? Never his trousers. Fortunately, his trousers never came off.
They did. They just turned into shorts.
I know. Anyway, he did have a joke in one of them, actually, Bill Bixby. He said, "I must get stretch shirts." He never did though. So, but at least he kept his trousers on. Otherwise, it would have been an X-rated show, wouldn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's. I'm thinking. Maybe that was probably how the tearaway pants or something. Promote. Sponsored by Hulk.
Exactly. I'll tell you one thing. If people want to watch it and they want to dip into it, there's a 2-parter called The Thirst, which is about an earlier Hulk, and that's probably one of the best stories. Series 4. So if you only want to dip into it, check out those 2 episodes. Brilliant. And Bill Bixby's acting is fantastic in it. So I know we're going a bit off topic now, going about the Hulk compared to Dracula, but I thought, check it out because it's a great series.
Exactly. Well, Dracula's shadow is over everything, so we need to get it all in there.
Exactly. Yeah, there you go.
So speaking of, I guess, the shadow that Dracula casts, I mean, there's so many different interpretations of him over the last, 126, 127 years now, that everybody has their own definition of Dracula based on the media that they've absorbed based off of Dracula. So for those that think they've seen everything there is to see about Dracula, what do you think, from what you've seen of the documentary, your writing of it, of course, what do you think the people are going to come away with and be the most surprised to know about, maybe I didn't know that, or maybe a moment where they thought, wow, that changes everything that I ever thought I knew about Dracula and, the father of Dracula, Bram Stoker.
Yeah, well, without giving too much away, I think you'll find that a lot of the influences will surprise people. The ideas that he got, and I mean, we've spoken a little bit about that, so people might think, God, I never knew that. And also, crucially, I mean, the original figure of Dracula was nothing like Bela Lugosi or Christopher Lee or Frank Langella. He was an old man with a moustache and like a hook nose. So they sort of sexed him up a little bit, shall we say, Dracula, for the audiences of the 20th and 21st centuries. Yeah. I mean, Bela Lugosi made him into this sort of, debonair, suave, Eastern European gentleman. And Christopher Lee really sort of brought the sexual aspect to Dracula. And, I mean, a lot of women, I've asked women, when they watch the old Hammer films, what do you think of Christopher Lee as Dracula? And every woman that I've ever spoken to and asked this, they always turn around and say, God, he's sexy. I wouldn't mind getting bitten by him and things like that. So, how we imagine Dracula now wasn't how Bram Stoker imagined Dracula. And Dracula was also a warning about the nature of evil. So I don't know how Bram would react to the way that Dracula's been portrayed in sort of, to modern audiences, like you had... Kermit the Frog as a vampire biting his neck in the Muppets, which was very funny. And you had to count counting. Funny enough, in folklore, there is a type of vampire that's obsessed with numbers. So they actually based it on that. But, so, and also there was a comedy, wasn't it? God, who played him now? There was a comedy. And I mean, you've had the Nicolas Cage, which is the most recent, which is very amusing. I love the way they sort of at the start, like sort of parody the Bela Lugosi, welcome to my castle and listen to the children of the night. And, that was brilliant. So I love that Renfield.
Yeah. No, Renfield's fantastic.
Did Leslie Nielsen? Yeah, Leslie Nielsen played.
He did.
Yeah, that's it.
The parody ones I thought were pretty great, but I'm not kind of a person though too, where I mean, I can just as easily laugh at something that I typically would find scary. Like Renfield was brilliant. I thought it was.
Yeah. And Dracula, then he turns around and he said, "I'm the victim, here." He sort of adapted, sort of token of being a victim. I think that was a bit of modern satire thrown in because you never could imagine Dracula as a victim, would you? Although Christopher Lee did actually say that he was always frustrated with Hammer that they didn't use more Stoker. He'd say, "Look, you've got great writing there. Use Stoker." So he never was allowed to play Dracula in the way that he wanted to play him and should have played him. But he actually said, that really Dracula was a tragic figure because, whatever turned him into a vampire and things like that, part of him perhaps didn't want to be that way and he was compelled to do the things. So he said there was a little bit of a tragedy about him. I think the last Hammer film that Christopher Lee did was Dracula, The Satanic Rites. I think he has Peter Cushing referencing that Dracula was going to try to start this plague to wipe out humanity because basically he wanted to die. He'd had enough. But they never really pursued that. But yeah, so even you could argue, I suppose, although obviously Nicolas Cage, sort of exaggerated a bit, but perhaps Dracula was a bit of a victim, that, circumstances, perhaps he didn't want to be a vampire and he was driven by this obsession and, something that he couldn't get away from.
Yeah, and I think I really like the themes that were explored in some of the Anne Rice books too regarding that, with Interview with the Vampire and how Lestat was just this, poor soul that never asked for this, but he embraced it. For him, it was all or nothing. But it was definitely had a strong air of loneliness in there too, because of course, humanity was always out of reach for him.
People say it would be great to live forever, but if you were a vampire and you could only go out at night, you had to kill people to exist and then sleep in the coffin. It's not very well. I wouldn't want to do it, basically. But a lot of these horror figures are tragic, aren't they? I mean, the Wolfman, played by Lon Chaney Jr., he didn't choose that. He was looking to get cured or to die, so he was a tragic figure. And Boris Karloff's monster was a tragic figure. He didn't ask to be what he was. He didn't ask to be turned into that, So there's a little bit of tragedy around these figures. It's fascinating. And I've obviously seen the film version of her novel, which is very good. And you had a little girl who, was a vampire. She said, "I've never got the chance to grow up. I'm stuck as I am."
Yeah.
So there is a little tragedy about these characters, and it's a shame, as I said before, that Christopher Lee wasn't allowed to perhaps explore that aspect of Dracula, because Hammer just wanted him to go out and bite attractive women in the neck, shall we say, and but there you go. It worked though, because it made him famous, didn't it?
Yeah, that it did. And you're probably going to hear some of my kids here a little bit too, John. So just a heads up.
Hello. Don't want to scare them.
No. Actually, it's great. My little guy loves all that kind of stuff, and he's fascinated by Johnny Gruesome and all the horror things too. So he might be a budding Dracula lover, I'm sure, in time. So let's really have a nice little library for him to start off with, anyway. So we'll get it right.
Yeah. Well, fascinating character, Dracula. And I learned a lot doing the research and that. So things that I didn't know. So hopefully, when people watch the documentary, they'll think, "God, I didn't know that." So thanks to Dacre for providing all the research that he did, and I did a lot of research myself and referenced other books. As I said, including a couple of documentaries of Vincent Price and Christopher Lee. So they had a helping hand in this. Perhaps you should put them as a thank you in the credits.
No kidding, right? Thanks, guys. Well, you can certainly dedicate it to. Let me know that might work too, I suppose.
Yeah, that'd be good actually to dedicate it to them. I said, because as I said, I'll get a book out of it, so I'll probably dedicate it to all the actors that have played Dracula. Because Frank Langella was a great Dracula. I think he was voted the sexiest Dracula ever, wasn't he? I think that was some poll they did, and all these women. Hello, cats. That's not werecat, is it? There you go. Hello, can you still hear me?
Sorry about that. Yep, I can. Sorry about that technical difficulties. It's funny. I feel so bad, John, because my cat's is a jerk because she's a cat. And what's really funny is she's made appearances before, but usually you get the right end of her. And I say, hey, at least you know what end you're going to get. So at least we get this one. So you
that was all right. That was all right. Well, the Egyptians worshipped cats, didn't they? Mummified them. So yeah, I like cats. I haven't got a cat or anything, but yeah, cats are nice. So I have to say hello to her from me.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that. And I guess to end on that note, what else are you working on as well, John? Because I know you mentioned that you've got a couple of other projects that you're going to be working on above and beyond the Father of Dracula.
Well, I'd like to say I write ghost stories for Psychic News, a magazine which is out every month, including in the US. And my latest book on ghosts, English ghosts, British ghost stories, with an intro by Jason Figgis, is available on Amazon. Yeah, along with my other ghost books are Britain's Ghostly Heritage, Britain's Haunted Heritage, and they're on Amazon too. We're working on a documentary on Jack the Ripper. So with Mike Hawley, who's done quite a few books on the Ripper in America. We've got some film projects lined up, music documentaries. Jason's written a few scripts for films. He's hoping to direct a thing called The Athena Syndrome, which is basically a spy thriller. Hopefully, I'm supposed to have an acting role in that. So there's quite a few things coming up. We got the Shirley Baker documentary, which I wrote, coming out, probably on Fox Tubi. So yeah, there's quite a few projects, and personally, I'll be probably doing another ghost book, carrying on with the Psychic News stuff. I was in a film called Boudica, Queen of War, which is available online, with a Bond girl, Olga, from Quantum of Solace. I play a Roman. and I'm the one that orders the Romans to kill her at the end. So don't hold that against me. But she was a lovely lady. Kicked me in the head. I was once seen I was playing dead as an extra because they said, "Oh, we'll reuse you as a dead Roman." Because and she clunked me in the head with her foot, and I had to stay in character. But she apologised. So I can actually say I've been kicked in the head by a Bond girl. So there you go. Not many blokes will say that.
I can't say that.
No, she's a lovely lady. I hope to be interviewing her. But yeah, we got a few projects lined up, films, documentaries. The Dracula one obviously is going on Indiegogo, and the Jack the Ripper one will be going on Indiegogo in due course. And so watch this space. Basically, I've got a website, johnwestmedia.com, so you can sort of find out what I'm doing on there. And I'm on Facebook and X and that, so you can sort of follow me up there and Instagram now.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. My cat is absolutely destroying the place over here.
I gathered it was your cat. You know, perhaps she's getting fed up. She doesn't want to hear about vampires anymore. Perhaps it's scaring her a little bit. But anyway, what's the name?
Muse.
Muse. Oh, that's Muse's name. Hello, Muse.
Well, you know, it's funny because I really like the name. It's the cat that ends up getting eaten by the Gorgon from Stranger Things.
Oh,
he called this cat Muse. I thought that is great, and it's so perfect for her. So we got her from the SPC out here. So the animal, basically like the Humane Society. So she's a bit of a rescue cat in that sense. And when they got her, I guess they have to give pets names because I guess it makes it more personal and people will get them. I don't know, but they named her Princess. Which she is she thinks she's a princess. She thinks she's a friggin' queen. But we named her Muse because I like the name of it. And it fits her so well because, honestly, this cat doesn't ever shut up. I'm surprised that she wasn't mewing over here. I'm just knocking everything over. Great cat.
Yeah. If you love cats, there's a film called The Uncanny with Peter Cushing, a 70s film. It's an anthology film. And every story involves a cat. And it's quite an entertaining little film. It's not well remembered now, but it's good in its own way. So if you love cats, you want to see a horror film about cats, The Uncanny, starring Peter Cushing. That's another plug. I'm not getting paid for that either.
No, well, I'll give a plug too. Since we're on the subject. So last night somebody got me going out a Robert Morgan rabbit hole. So I watched his film Stop Motion a bit ago, and I had him on my podcast too, and he does mostly, that's what he does. He does short stop motion films. So there's one that's called The Cat with Hands, and it's one of the creepiest, most bizarre, strangest things you'll ever see. And you can get it free on YouTube as well. So they're all available on YouTube. So if you plug in, I think I did, what was it, Robert Morgan short films, and it came up a whole playlist, and The Cat with Hands is one of them. Mm-hmm. It's bizarre. If you like cats now, you may think twice about ever getting one after that.
All right. Anyway, well, there you go. But I love cats. So, and as I said, the Egyptians loved them even more. Yeah. So, I think cats think they own the place, don't they? You're not the owner. They are.
Yeah, a dog you can train, but cats end up ultimately training you, and you just figure out how to live with them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she walks in and thinks, "This is my place. Come on."
Yeah, what are you doing? And it's funny because you kind of nudge her away, and she just pushes back harder. So I'm like, all right, I guess you're the boss.
Yeah, good old cats.
Yes. Well, John, this has been an awesome experience. So I'm really, really glad that the Dacre introduced us. I cannot wait for the Father of Dracula. I think that people are going to be super fascinated, and hopefully they'll find Bram Stoker as fascinating as Dracula. I know I was pleasantly surprised when I got to learn more about Bram. I know the first time I chatted with Dacre, we ended up talking, I think 90% of the time about Bram Stoker, and then a little bit about Dracula because it's so fascinating. I think people are really going to enjoy this.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they will. I hope they will. And and it'll be out in due course. But please go on when April the 1st we launch it. Tell your friends, share it. Make a donation. The cheapest one is 10 equivalent to £10. I know
that's not bad at all.
So and then I think the top one is like 500, something like that. But then you get all the goodies, including my book. But just support it, share it with as many people as you can to get this made. And we're so thrilled that Dacre's involved in it. A descendant of Bram Stoker, and he's narrating it. So and Jason Figgis, the director's from Dublin. So you've got the Irish as well. So I'm a Londoner myself, but there again, Bram was in London researching at the London Library So there's it's a London connection too. London gets mentioned in there as well.
Perfect. No, that's brilliant. I think, and I'll put a link down below so everybody watching this, you can give a click. And I think this is a super rare opportunity as well because, Dracula's been taking a piece out of us for over a century now. So this is about time that we can actually give we can become a little piece of Dracula. So in this documentary. So that's really cool that we can be a part of that through the crowdfunding and get some extra cool bonus perks as well.
Yeah, great. And it's the first time, as far as I'm aware, that a member of the Stoker family has been involved in a documentary on Bram Stoker, from beginning to end. So that's great. So it's great to have that sort of, family connection, shall we say, with the Stokers.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to being a part of resurrecting this as well and getting it out there to the public. And John, I definitely look forward to having you back on here again so we could talk a little bit about more of this, of all things Dracula and beyond, and perhaps more about the Jack the Ripper as well and the connection with Dracula.
Oh, definitely. And I could chat to you another time about Groglin Grange. I can send you the information. It's one of the most famous stories in Britain. That's something we could talk about in the future. There's not many vampire stories from Britain, but that's one of them, and it is a fascinating case.
Perfect. No, I look forward to that as well. I'm all in when it comes to vampires.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me on your show. I've enjoyed it immensely.
Absolutely. Thank you as well, John. Much appreciated.
Thank you.